Tonight on the Goblin's Corner.
Our Planar series, Part 3, The Ethereal Plane.
That's how we roll. 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 That's how we roll.
Welcome to the Goblin's Corner. My name is Eric.
And I'm Matt.
And tonight,
We're doing part 3 of our Planar series, The Ethereal Plane.
how delightful. The Ethereal Plane is a dimension that doesn't get a whole hell of a lot of love,
It's got a little bit of something going on now.
and it's got a lot more in the near future as well.
Yeah.
So tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the Ethereal Plane, all of the fun beasties you can find in it, some thematic and story options, a little bit of lore from all of the editions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to touch on a little bit of all of it.
Touch a little bit on that stuff. Before we get to all of that, though, we've got...
Question of the week, man.
All right. So what is the question of the week tonight, Matt?
The question of the week is, what would your personal demiplane look like?
Ah, yes. Because the Ethereal Plane is where the demiplanes are from,
Exactly.
my personal demiplane, it's definitely going to have a luxury-sized bed in it because I've been craving sleep since the late 90s.
Mhm.
So I would say definitely that is going to have a major component
Yes.
for my demiplane. I haven't really thought about anything else. Maybe
Room-sized bed.
a room-sized bed, a pool would be nice. You know what? I kind of see my demiplane as having like a bouncy house.
Yeah. Okay.
I could see my demiplane as like this gigantic,
Bouncy mansion.
a bouncy mansion. Yes, a bouncy mansion. Big Trouble Little China is playing in every corner of the room.
Sure.
I don't know why it's playing. I already know the movie by heart, but still.
Except for the occasional rooms where there are Godzilla marathons.
Yes, or Spaceballs,
Yeah.
which is also acceptable.
You've got the Mel Brooks wing.
The Mel Brooks, yes, very good. There's a Troll 2 movie down in the basement where it belongs. MST3K in the living room.
Absolutely.
I think that would be delightful. And I believe that all of the pillows would not be pillows. They would be huggable flumps.
Of course they would. And other than flumps, it would be peopled by invisible servants.
Yes, most
Or
likely.
unseen servants.
Unseen servants, absolutely. Yeah, that sounds great to me. What's not to like?
Absolutely nothing.
There'll be rum drinks, I'm sure, at some point.
Certainly if I swing by.
Maybe a gigantic gin and tonic pool.
You could be a lime.
I
And a
could be
gin
a
and tonic.
lime in a gin and tonic pool. Think about that. That'd be great.
Imagine a slushy machine that dispenses frozen slushy gin and tonics.
Oh, I can totally imagine that.
That would be delightful.
That's like Bourbon Street. Because, you know, they've got all the liquor slushies on
Mhm.
Bourbon Street. Yeah.
I haven't seen a gin and tonic one, though.
I'm sure that one
I'm not
exists.
saying, I was going to say, I'm not saying that
I
they're-
would be shocked and surprised if one doesn't exist. I don't know. People in New Orleans, let me know. Hit us
Yeah.
up. All right. What would your dimension be if you had like a demiplane to your own self?
It would be a large, luxurious hunting lodge.
Yes. I see a lot of wood paneling in your future.
Sure. Certain, like a large library with big overstuffed leather chairs
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with books that don't produce dust so that I can have a book collection again.
Certainly a fantasy situation here, if there ever was one. I see heads on a wall, but I don't see animal heads for some reason.
If it's a demiplane, it would probably be monster heads.
Monster heads?
Yeah.
I'd be fine with that.
And
Or politicians. Politicians' heads would also be appropriate.
with imagine having the monster heads
Mm-hmm.
with a permanent speak with dead enchanted to it.
They just sound like the Billy Bass the whole time.
No.
That's
You can
a deep cut, by the way, folks.
It is.
Some people don't know about what Billy Bass is.
You can ask them questions. They don't get to speak freely.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. They don't just sing on the wall like
Mm-mm.
Evil Dead.
Absolutely not. No, take me to the river.
Ah, that was good. Yeah, don't put me in the water. All right, well, that's interesting. And I also feel that coffee would be involved in your hunting lodge as well.
It's true. A psychically activated coffee machine. You know, we both forgot to mention something which is clearly true for both of us.
Which is what?
a fully stocked pantry and bar.
Well, yes. I mean, that's kind of a given, though. If we're going to have the unseen servants, we're going to have a fully stocked pantry and bar. It really, the things to squabble about are what's going to be in your pantry and bar versus mine.
Right. I think there's going to be a fair amount of overlap with bar, probably less so with pantry.
Probably so, yes. I will have all sorts of snacks. You'll have a lot more healthy food.
And a lot of variety.
Yeah, well, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that.
Especially if it's a magic pantry. Man, please. I'm gonna make Whole Foods look like the corner store. It's gonna be crazy in there.
I love that.
Fruits from Forgotten Realms and veggies from Eberron and
yeah. It's a magical grocery store.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All tended but with a psychically activated coffee dispenser.
And psychically activated coffee automaton.
Oh, it's become a psychically activated automaton now?
Well, sure. I mean, how else is it gonna, tamp the grounds and steam the milk and
So you've got a robot barista.
Yes.
And basically the magical equivalent of Whole Foods.
Yes.
I'm down with that. All right.
In a hunting lodge.
In a hunting lodge.
By the river.
By the river. Take me to the river. All right. Yeah. Do you work in a coffee shop or perhaps you work in a grocery store? Write to us. info@goblinscorner.com, or you can reach me, Eric@goblinscorner.com, or
me, Matt @goblinscorner.com.
And of course, you can find us on all the things.
It's true. We're just more and more things every day.
We haven't hit Muzak yet, but we'll probably be there too someday. That's when you know you've made it, when you're in an elevator and they're playing the podcast in the elevator. I cried a little when Nirvana was on an elevator once.
I was going to say, is that when you've made it, or is that when you should stop?
That's when your mom knows about it. Yeah, think about that. All right, let's get to the matter at hand here. We're talking about the Ethereal Plane. Matt?
Indeed.
Why are we talking about the Ethereal Plane?
Well, there's a new game coming out, Journey Through the Radiant Citadel.
Yes.
And that centers on a city in the Ethereal Plane.
It looks great. Can't wait to play it.
Looks very cool.
And because it is Ethereal Plane related, we figured, hey, what an appropriate time.
Sure.
Most people, when they think of the Ethereal Plane, they just think of it as kind of like this misty realm where nothing much goes on. But there's a lot of stuff going on in there.
It's true. It's one of the transitive planes, which makes it very important.
Yeah, so along with the astral plane and the shadow plane.
Yep.
Additionally, it's unique in the fact that it's one of the few planes creatures can exist simultaneously between it and the prime. So you've got a lot of dual-dimensional beings, for example, like blink dogs and phase spiders and so forth.
It's basically just the transitive planes, right?
I believe so, yeah. I think some creatures exist in like the plane of shadow and the prime. I don't know if anything exists in the astral and the prime.
I have to check that out.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm curious.
Jump into the lore books on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why we're doing the Ethereal Plane. More specifically, let's maybe get into some descriptions about what the Ethereal Plane actually is.
Okay. Sounds good.
So what is the Ethereal Plane, Matt?
Well, it's often called the misty shore or the waveless sea. The ethereal plane is a dimension of colorful mist stretching on to forever, touching every prime material plane and connecting them to the inner planes.
That's right. So it is the connective tissue between the inner planes and the prime material plane, all of the prime material planes. So all the various what-if worlds and also the, in game terms, the game worlds.
Yep.
So Forgotten Realms, your Kryn, your Eberron, and so forth.
There was only ever one true exception to that.
Which was
Dark Sun.
Dark Sun, yeah. Because Dark Sun was separated.
The only way you could get to Dark Sun is through the elemental planes because they were the only planes that touched.
Mm-hmm. Or Wild Space.
Theoretically.
You could find it in Wild Space.
It was stated that Dark Sun was an unfindable sphere. Now, that's up to your DM.
I mean, they statted it out. They had all the planets and stuff. I'm just saying. Speaking of Phlogiston and Wild Space and stuff, back in the day, and I'm thinking like first or second edition here, it was theorized that the ethereal plane touched the Phlogiston.
Yeah.
Which is interesting in how they went with that. Of course, now with the new Spelljamming coming out, it's touching the astral sea, but same kind of thing.
Concept.
Yeah, same kind of concept. And also, in addition to that, the ethereal plane is unique in that it is composed of two different parts. It's got the border ethereal and the deep ethereal, and they're way different.
Very much.
Let's talk a little bit about what the differences are. What's the difference between the border ethereal versus the deep ethereal?
All right. Well, the border ethereal is the one that touches all of the primes. It's the one that allows travelers to see dimly through to primes that they are close to or that they're traveling along for their respective primes, right?
Yeah. So it's the one that most people are familiar with. If you go ethereal, you kind of see an overlay of the ethereal plane and your home plane, right? Whatever world you're having to be playing on. And you can, move through stuff. Of course, people, we'll get to the actual
nuts and bolts of that.
the qualities and stuff. But it is what most people are familiar with. It's just kind of like, the misty version of whatever plane I'm on.
Right. And then the deep ethereal is the part that I love because it's where things get weird. It contains proto-matter, which is like baby demiplanes, little seeds of possibility. Actual demiplanes, extra-dimensional spaces like Leomund's secret chest.
Yeah.
It also is where the route to the inner planes and possibly other prime material planes exists.
And it should be noted that the inner planes also have their border ethereal realms as well.
Yes.
Not just the primes. So wherever that plane touches, you've got a border. So it's almost like border, deep sea, border. That deep ethereal is like the ocean, essentially.
Right.
There's also, speaking of borders, there's also this border layer between the border ethereal and the deep ethereal.
Yes.
And that's really interesting because it's where all of the color changing curtains exist. And you kind of have to get through that stuff to get into the deep ethereal. And then in the deep ethereal, they've got color changing curtains, which take you to other planes.
Right.
They're basically one-sided portals.
Like the color pools in the astral plane.
Yeah, very similar, but
and I personally think that there's a connection there. Like, I don't think that's accidental.
You don't think
I think it's design.
You don't think it's lazy writers just coming up with something? Okay. I'm willing to accept that. We should explore that sometime.
I think it's where two transitive planes meet.
That's interesting. I like that. That'd be really cool. Explain shadow then.
Man, the problem with shadow is that you don't get monochromatic rainbows, sir.
Yeah, fair enough. I want a monochromatic rainbow. Now let's talk a little about some common stats for your plane. And this is, of course, determined by the version of D&D you're playing.
Sure.
But there seem to be several standard issue qualities with the ethereal plane.
Right.
The first is that it has no gravity, but it has a definite up and down direction, which I find interesting. It's no gravity, but you can tell whether it's
down
up and
is
down.
Definitely down.
Down is definitely down. Where the is down?
Down.
Down. Right there. Now, it's really easy when you're in the border because you can literally see the ground.
Yeah.
But if you're in the deep ethereal...
And there's still a random down.
Yeah. What does that mean? Even
though you can travel down and you can travel up freely, there's still a down.
Yeah. So figure that one out, folks. I haven't figured that out yet. Objects
down towards the center of the universe.
Yes. Where it's down. Where there's a universe, Jack. Objects dropped will hover in place, which is interesting. So if you have like a wrench, you just drop the wrench, it just sticks there.
Yeah, you just hang it in the sky.
So it is not weightlessness. I would assume if you like maybe chuck it, it slows down. Maybe the mists slow it down. It's not. There's not a lack of inertia, which I find interesting. So it's not being in space,
right?
Because if you just drop a wrench in space, it'll just float off.
Only because of the minute amount of force you put on it, but
right,
but that would still be accurate.
Yeah, and just fly away. Whereas in the ethereal plane, it'll just kind of sit there.
That's because of the possibility that there's a bench there.
There you go. That's nice. I was just thinking the squishy atmosphere, but I like that much better than that.
Yeah, you just think about setting it on a shelf and go about your business.
Sure. Yeah, I'm down with that. It's got normal time, with the exception of the deep ethereal. We'll get to that in a minute. The deep ethereal is every 10 hours spent in the deep ethereal equals 1 hour in real life.
Right.
So much like combat, if you think about it.
Nice.
10 hours equal 1 hour of combat. So you only age 1 hour for every 10 spent in the deep ethereal. Players, your wizard needs a hideout in the deep ethereal.
Yes, that is where research happens.
Absolutely. It's aligned neutral if you guys play with alignments. If you don't, go check out our thing on alignments. Why, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And normal magic, so nothing wacky about spells.
Nope.
And that's pretty much it. From all the different versions, that's pretty much the common stats.
Now let's talk about some of the unique challenges.
And there's several. It's not as bad as like being in the wilderness, but it's in some ways it's worse. And we're going to go through the usual qualities we do when we describe planes, so like creatures and travel and survival and whatever weather happens to exist and so forth. And the first we have is, of course, getting to and fro. So let's talk a little bit about travel.
All right. Travel is both easy and difficult.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, well, so you travel by force of will, and you travel at your normal movement in any direction, three-dimensionally.
And we've established that there's always a down, and you know it.
But you can still travel up, and it's fine.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm really stuck on this thing about being down.
The problem with being able to travel freely just by thinking about it is that visibility is kind of garbage in the ethereal.
Yeah, and in fact, depending upon the version, it's, I think, anywhere between 10 feet to 60 feet. And from what I've gathered, I think 30 feet is usually the norm, but I would alter it according to thematics as a DM and whether or not a ghost is creeping up on you, but from behind.
Yeah, absolutely. I would alter visibility based off of events and flavor.
It's totally a DM whim on this one.
And I would even go up to like 100 feet, right? Like when the wind blows through the fog bank, right? And actually blows it out of the way briefly before it fills back in.
That would be nice.
I think that would be cool.
Speaking of the fog and mist, the features oftentimes are indistinct. So if you're on the border, everything is indistinct, but travels exceptionally fast. One of the reasons is not because you travel any faster per se, but you can float over a mountain or through a mountain in many cases.
Yeah.
Through a wall. And that is very useful. Now, there's a caveat to that we'll get to in just a minute.
Sure. But also terrain doesn't matter, right? So if you've marshy or if the road is gutted out or anything like that, you just
fly over it.
Forward. Yep.
You have to fly over it.
Yep.
And we'll get to why in just a second. There's a whole lot of nothing. So that's good and that's bad. It's easy to travel through.
Yeah.
It's bad because you don't have a Denny's.
Sure. And if you didn't bring your coffee automaton, it's going to be a rough night.
Yeah, you're out of luck then. All objects are rendered into ethereal substance upon entering. Anything you bring turns ethereal, including yourself.
Right.
Which is good. So you could have all of your stuff with you when you go ethereal, and you can pass through, as I mentioned, go through a mountain, go through buildings. Yeah. It also means you can't pick anything up. So if you're on the border ethereal, you're not grabbing a sword or anything like that unless it's in the ethereal plane.
Right.
Now, this sounds great in terms of travel, as we mentioned, and you mentioned the swamp, but this does have a caveat.
It does.
A huge, huge caveat that people don't read.
All living creatures radiate an aura that cannot be passed through.
Now, that includes plants.
Yes, jungles and forests and what have you. It's also thematically why having castles that are covered in vines are actually important.
Yeah, because that means in game terms, in the ethereal plane, you can't get through those vines.
Yeah, it's not for the look. It's not decoration.
Now you're looking at your druid in a whole new light because he's got a house made out of sticks. It happens to be living sticks.
Yep.
But ghosts aren't getting in there.
Nope. Yes, this is my ghost-free bungalow.
Now, in addition to not being able to get through living creatures, you also can't touch them or manipulate them in any way. So you can't force your way through a forest,
Right.
Which means if you go ethereal in a rainforest
You're pretty
might-
much trapped.
You might be trapped.
You could just like squeeze back and forth. But if you're in a clearing that is walled around by thicket, yeah, you're kind of out of luck.
Yeah, so go ethereal in a desert, apparently.
Can you imagine being trapped in a blackberry bramble and somebody casts ethereal on you and you're just stuck?
That would be awful. That would be a great way to trap a big bad evil guy. If
Yeah.
you didn't want to kill the person, you just make them permanently ethereal and stick them in a living bramble that never ages.
Well, that and brambles are filled with thorns.
That's true.
And if those thorns also radiate living energy, miserable. That's awful.
It's terrible. Now, in addition to living creatures, also exceptionally dense materials like lead or gold, and also some other metals too, depending upon the version. Some people say like mithril was one of them, or adamantine or whatever.
I think adamantine is obviously
Yeah,
the right choice.
I'd be down with that too. Alchemical mixtures oftentimes as well.
Yeah, they used to have ghost shellac that you could paint walls with.
Yeah, made out of nice pressed ghosts.
Yep.
There's also spells, but of course, the biggest one is Wall of Force.
Sure. Any force effect.
Yeah, so you can't get through that stuff in the ethereal plane as well. So savvy wizards will often Wall of Force something or permanency a Wall of Force just so that people can't get in. Or lead-lined rooms, right?
You already use them to prevent people from scrying. You might as well use them to prevent ghosts as well.
Yeah, double plus good there.
Yep.
Now let's talk a little bit about the deep ethereal, because there are some distinctions with that and the border. Right now we're just talking about the border.
The deep ethereal, depending on what version, was less easy. You could encounter one-way color curtains that randomly drop you off in a plane.
Hello, plane of fire.
Yeah. I don't know if you realize, but mathematically being dropped through a planar portal is going to end up worse rather than better most of the time.
Yeah, if you look at the charts, most of the time it's...
Yeah, the math on that is not beneficial.
Considering where the ethereal plane goes, predominantly the elemental planes or other primes, could end up in some serious trouble.
Also, you have ethereal storms.
Not good either.
Nope. They will, in fact, tear you to pieces. But they have demiplanes. Who doesn't love demiplanes? I love demiplanes.
Unless you run into the wrong one.
Look, then you pillage it and you run.
Except for the demiplane that's living, which does exist, by the way.
Well, there's also an entire planet made of worms. So,
Yeah,
in the deep ethereal.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I love the deep ethereal, is because it's just so bizarre sometimes.
Now, the biggest problem with the deep ethereal, in addition to the spells and all the other stuff we talked about, is it's super easy to just get lost because it doesn't have the same landmarks as the border ethereal.
It has no landmarks. And in fact, landmarks don't matter because things move in the deep ethereal.
Yes.
So to get to another prime plane, you have to hit the border ethereal, find a curtain to get to the deep, or keep going opposite from the border ethereal.
And you wind up in the deep.
And you wind up in the deep. And then you have to find the appropriate color curtain in the deep to get to the border again, to get to the border out.
Sounds really confusing.
Yes.
Basically, the way I look at it is,
Find the path.
well, that works, yes. But also I was thinking in terms of, from a DM perspective and from like a storyline perspective, you're describing this plane, start them in the border ethereal.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it like the ocean. You dipped your toes in the water.
Right.
And you can see the shore in the border ethereal. And then they've got to figure out how to swim out away from shore. Because remember, the cardinal directions still exist because you're still in the border ethereal. But they would metaphorically wander away from the plane.
Off the continental shelf.
Yep. And that becomes deep ocean. And that's the deep ethereal. And then they got to swim to shore again. And that becomes another shore, which is another border ethereal. and then they wind up in the plane of ooze or whatever,
Yeah.
or dark sun.
The parelemental plane of lightning.
Yes,
That's not going to end up
the
poorly.
quasi-paramental plane of coffee.
Right on the border of where it meets milk and chocolate.
Yes, the mocha plane,
Yes.
the mocha demi-plane. Now, that would be delightful. All right, let's talk a little bit about the terrain of the ethereal plane. What are we looking at here?
Well, if you're on the border ethereal, then basically it's whatever's going on the prime.
Okay, so depending upon the version, you have what you see is what you get.
Right. And that actually includes the inner planes as well. If you're on the border ethereal for those border planes.
What you see is what you get. If
Yep.
you're on the border to the plane of air, you're looking at the plane of air, just mistier version of the plane of air. How do you tell?
Whether or not the islands are see-through.
That's a good point. Now, depending upon the version, you also have ghosts of realms linked by psychic emanations. And what I mean by that is that strong emotions or places where things may have happened overlap current terrain.
Yes.
So, for example, let's say there's an old fort that's no longer on the prime, but it took place because there was a mighty battle.
Exactly.
A lot of psychic energy just resonating there. You might, when you pop over to the ethereal, have that fort just chilling in a bog where the fort doesn't exist, or overlapping a building now,
Sure.
which is somewhat hazardous to navigate because you're now trying to navigate through a building, a fort, which is clearly ethereal, which means you have to pretend that
Actually navigate the fort
yeah,
because it's physical on the ethereal plane.
but it doesn't exist on the prime.
Right.
And then you also have to navigate whatever janky stuff is going on the prime that might block you as well.
Somebody's freaking house plant is stuck right in the middle of the doorway you need to get through.
Oh, and you can't get in? How terrible is that? You got to go back to the prime, break the house plant, go back to the ethereal just so you can raid the fort.
Oh, that would be
That
hilarious.
sucks.
I'm a terrible person.
Now, terrain in the deep, that's pretty easy. There's none.
Whatever demiplane or objectoid you happen to come across is what's there.
Now, there's plenty of proto-matter floating around,
Mm-hmm.
and DMs use whatever your twisted mind comes up with for that. It could be potential objects popping into being, or even potential planes or potential realms. So you might be floating along, just minding your own business, and all of a sudden you're wading in an ocean with just massive amounts of phase mosasaurs swimming around.
Sure.
I mean,
Why not?
anything. Could be real matter as well floating around too.
Yes.
I mean, wizards do bring stuff over.
And it is also theorized in some of the editions that new worlds are born in the deep ethereal,
Oh, that's cool.
in the primordial soup. And when they reach the point of being a fully formed world, they are ejected into the prime, creating a new curtain for it.
And a new crystal sphere and so forth. I like that. That's really cool.
I have actually a game based or a campaign thought based off that.
There's also some theory that believe, and this goes along with what you're talking about, is that the myths are potential matter.
Mhm.
And so with the right amount of willpower, because remember, it's force of will to move, which means it could also be force of will to create, then you could theoretically create anything you want. Of course, it'd be ethereal matter, but if you need a hammer, you have a hammer. You just need someone with enough willpower to make it.
Mhm.
Much like the plane of limbo,
Yes.
where if you just think hard enough, you can create a mallet. And why wouldn't you create a mallet in limbo? I mean, what else would you need?
But you can only create non-living things in limbo. My point being, you can create living things in the deep ethereal.
Oh, yes. Maybe so. That would be fun.
Some guy got drunk hundreds of thousands of years ago, went swimming in the deep ethereal. Owlbears.
Maybe that's how they showed up. That's great. And they were promptly eaten by phase mosasaurs. Now, in terms of weather,
None. There's no traditional weather. How about that?
yes.
It doesn't rain.
Right. And if you're on the border ethereal, then the prime weather doesn't affect the border ethereal. So you could be in a torrential downpour and it doesn't matter.
Right.
Except, and I will stress this, what if it's raining frogs? Because they're living creatures.
It's true.
Then you're getting pelted.
And historically, it has occurred. I'm aware. It's better than raining cats and dogs.
That would also suck, yes. But there is some weather in the ethereal plane.
Mm-hmm. You've got psychic storms, ether cyclones.
That doesn't sound good.
Vortices, which is funny that you can have air-type storms, right, like cyclones, and water-type storms, like vortices, in the exact same location. That just explains exactly how mutable this plane is.
And they pretty much do the same thing. They either damage you or suck you out into the deep ethereal,
right?
Tear you asunder.
They also have time storms.
Yes. And I want to let's just sit on that for a second here. There's something to be said about time storms, because if you really, really need to retcon something or DM fiat, stick them in the ethereal plane. Hit them with the time storm. Now they're back in time. Or what a great way to start a campaign.
So hear me out.
I'm listening.
If you have a character that wants to make a change, or if you have a player that wants to make a change to their character, they get struck by time lightning, and the person that is now in the group is actually from a different timeline. And you literally just make them
swap places.
Yep.
I love that. I would also make the previous character at some point come back just to mess with the current character.
I can't believe you guys left me.
Yeah. Yeah. Be something like that. Or maybe it's the evil version. Yeah. Finally, you have ether gaps, and that's actual rips in the ethereal plane. And that's often caused by some of the storms that were mentioned, or high-powered magic, or whatever.
Sure.
They don't really explain that. And they just lead to nowhere. And when I mean they lead to nowhere, they don't lead anywhere in the multiverse. Like, you're gone. Like, not the far realm. You just don't exist. You're a vestige.
You come to Earth.
You're lost in the... You come here.
Yep.
Wind up, look around. It's like, oh, I guess I got to get a day job now.
Then the banality destroys you.
Yes.
That's a little dark. We'll edit that.
Finally, no, we're not editing that.
We're not editing that.
No, screw that. It is dark. Terrible time. Finally, we come to natural disasters.
Generally speaking, there are none.
Although
some books have it so that the border realms, like if you're close to a color curtain or whatever, the border realms bleed through. So if you happen to be close to a fire realm, then
you're going to get burned even if you're in the border through. Now, I would say, like, if you're getting 20 points of damage around, you might get 5.
Sure.
And again, it's really dependent upon your story and stuff like that with that. I would say if you're in the border ethereal, you shouldn't really be damaged by it. I think it should be more thematic.
I think rather than fire damage, it should be psychic damage.
Oh, I like that. That'd be cool. So if you're taking 5 fire or 10 fire, whatever it is, you're taking 5 or 10 psychic?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm down with that.
Because you're seeing yourself surrounded by fire, knowing for a fact that it's not an illusion.
Yes. Now, the biggest danger isn't really the natural disasters of that we're talking about. It's mostly just the fact that there's not any food or water. There's mist. I would theorize that if you willpowered enough, you would produce some, but you have to figure that out.
Sure. There's part of me that says, if you end up in the deep ethereal and you don't have somebody that can cast create food or water, you've made a drastic mistake.
Absolutely. There's also chrono lilies. What are chrono lilies, Matt?
They're basically giant flowers which allow you to see the past, present, and future and interact with it.
That's counting. So time flower.
Yes.
Time daisies. Or time lilies, actually. Yeah. There's also the people that exist in the ethereal plane, and there are
residents and monsters.
Oh, yeah. And we'll get to some of those in a minute. And finally, the biggest danger, I would say, is...
Well, you've got demiplanes.
Yes. And that one we're not going to get into on this show because there's so many demiplanes. Ravenloft, for example.
Yes.
That it deserves its own show.
Absolutely.
Now, how does one survive on the ethereal plane? Stock up on supplies.
Yeah. Get a guide.
Yeah. Get somebody to show you around and some monster repellent for those phase mosasaurs.
Some bat dinosaur repellent.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say the biggest challenge is getting stuck on the plane.
Right. You've got to be able to, once again, do the whole border dance to get anywhere.
Yeah. And if you don't, then you're wandering around until you can find a guide or somebody to get you back.
Or you accidentally wander through the wrong curtain and
then
end up someplace you really don't want to be.
And then that's another Planar podcast for oh, you've wound up on this plane. Roll the dice.
In the aquatic depths, you immediately are destroyed by the pressure damage.
Yes, that absolutely happens. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about the ethereal plane and the creatures and denizens that reside, but we'll be right back.
After these messages. If there are any topics you would like us to cover, goods or services you would like us to review, or if you would like to sponsor an episode, we would love for you to contact us at info@goblinscorner.com.
And we're back.
Welcome back.
So we're talking about the ethereal plane.
It's true.
And we were going into the makeup of the ethereal plane, getting around, and mostly the terrain and traveling portion of moving through.
Sure.
And now we're going to get into...
denizens.
Yeah, so creatures and such. Let's start with the creatures and we'll get to the actual societies and such that exist in the ethereal plane. What are some creatures that we have?
First off, you have your ethereal natives. These include ethereal marauders, ethereal filchers, ethereal oozes, ethereal dragons.
Pretty much anything in the Monsters Manual that contains ethereal in it.
Sure.
And those creatures have existed for probably first edition or more.
Some of them, yeah.
Yeah, the ethereal filchers particularly.
Yes.
And I think the marauders also. But she's also got some of the dual creatures as well.
Right.
Like blink dogs are a good example.
And they've been around for forever. Phase spiders. Or, as you like to say, it, phase everything.
Yes, phase everything. Because, and again, if you want to make the ethereal plane vibrant and with a lot of different creatures and societies and stuff like that, it's really easy. Throw phase in front of whatever noun you need, and you've got it. Oh, a phase cat? No problem. Phase mosasaur? We've already got that. Go check it out.
Phase kobolds.
Phase kobolds. I like that. Yeah. Make them even sneakier than normal.
You've got thought eaters.
Yes. Which, if I recall, that was a third edition thing. They look like platypi.
Yep.
It's like a ghostly looking platypus, which is unexpected.
Yes.
But such an awesome monster that, for those of you who play 5th edition, go look that up.
Funny story about that. The drawing for the thought eaters is actually way nicer than what a platypus skeleton looks like.
They look kind of nasty.
They look freaking weird. As odd as they look in real life, they look even stranger as a skeleton.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of weird stuff in the ethereal plane. The Nilshai are another one that are just ridiculously weird looking.
Yeah. Because why not?
Yeah.
Because anything can exist here.
Yes. And I would say that should be the lore. If all this potential exists, make everything ridiculously weird and strange and maybe half proto creature. That'd be kind of cool. Now, what's also fun is this is one of the few realms where ghosts and other spirits, particularly ghosts, but also wraiths and shadows and stuff also exist.
Yes, they exist here. Not, or rather, they're created with the plane of shadow, but they exist in the ethereal plane.
Yeah, and I've never figured that out. And I think it's because in the older versions of D&D, they attributed the ethereal plane to kind of the afterlife, sort of. And that was before the plane of shadow became like a full-fledged plane.
Well, I think it's also because ghosts are attached to psychic resonance
Yes.
in a lot of mentalities and ideas. And so I think just like you can have psychic resonance of locations on the ethereal plane, you can have it of people or
Yeah.
creatures.
Absolutely. There's all kinds of ghosts. Ghosts of all types. And I would say use your imagination. You could do poltergeists, you could do the mean ghost, the good ghost, Casper ghosts, Scooby-Doo ghosts. Ghosts are happening. It's a Scooby-Doo ghost. They'll steal all your snacks and your weed.
And then try to develop your house.
Yeah.
Steal a bunch of property.
What else do we have that are ghost-like?
You've got ephemeral swarms.
So swarms of ghosts,
Yeah.
basically.
And the eye of fear and flame.
Yeah, it's an old cut right there. Good times. You also have all kinds of spirits in general, and that means demons and devils,
Yes.
because they're wandering around trying to get to the blood war.
Night hags.
Oh yeah, so a little bit of evil fae.
Sure. Actually, night hags for some reason are fae.
They're demons.
Yes, all of the other hags are fae, but night hags are demons. Even though they've got all of the normal fae-like features of it's a pet peeve of mine.
I can tell.
It
Tell me how you
frustrates
really
me.
feel about it, Matt.
I think it's nonsensical. Oh, they're just too evil to be fae. Whatever.
Speaking of creatures that are too evil to be something else, you've got nightmares. Horses that are too evil to be horses. They're malevolent horse demons.
Yes, they are. And
You also have succubi.
yes, indeed.
We'll leave it like that.
You've got settlers, which seems weird.
But they're creatures that were native to someplace else, and they've come and adapted to this realm.
Right.
And there's several.
A lot of them are things that can innately see into the ethereal realm anyway, because that only makes sense. You've got Lamasu,
Mm-hmm.
Medusa.
Yeah. Think about that. Wander around in the ethereal realm and a Medusa shows up. You know how you know? You run into a statue and you're like, wait a minute. Where'd this rock garden come
That
from?
somebody just set on a shelf.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just floating there. But you know which way is down
Mhm.
every single time. There's also, what is it, cockatrice?
And basilisks.
Yes.
There's a theme there.
Petrification creatures.
Yeah.
Well, they can all see into the ethereal is why.
Right. That seems weird to me.
And also, I would say anything that can see ethereal might lair here, which means Kuatoa should be in the ethereal. Because they have basically true seeing.
Mm-hmm. Well, they can lair there. They can lair anywhere they want. They just invent a god, and then the god lets them do what they want to do.
Yeah, Kuatoas are cool. What else do we have? There's some ridiculous creatures.
I've never worked out the pronunciation of this, but I'm the Catabalipus, the Catablipus.
Good enough for this show. Yeah.
That thing. But he's got death eyes instead.
Yes. And foo dogs.
Yeah. And Fu Lions.
That's right. Finally, you have the societies. And some of the societies are the ghost elves, which are kind of neat.
Mm-hmm. The Zill.
The Zill. Yeah. That's
I like them.
another deep cut there. People don't know about the Zill. And my favorite creatures of the ethereal planes, the ether gaunts.
So we're going to talk a little bit about some of their cultures just to touch on them.
Yeah. So let's talk about the ghost elves first.
All right. Ghost elves are from the way, way back. That's the first thing you have to understand.
Pre-drow.
Yes. They were neutral elves from before the war, which led to the drow existing. Then they got killed by drow.
Mm-hmm.
So they aligned with an entity, Thule, who turned out was a pit fiend
Whoops.
and tortured them for millennia. So now
They've escaped.
they've escaped and they fight drow and fiends equally. And they live in glowing cities.
That's a hell of a backstory right there. They really got the short end of the stick there.
We got trapped in a war that wasn't our war.
The
We got
crazy-
attacked by some people who were supposed to be our people, but weren't our people. We found a savior. He was a pit fiend. He tortured us for millennia. And then we finally broke free, so we made glowing cities.
and we're pissed off. We're gonna kill all the drow and demons.
all the fiends,
Yeah,
yeah.
all the fiends and drow. That's cool. We've also got the Zill.
Sure.
And the Zill, not as cool of a backstory. They just are reptilian red. They kind of look like red reptilian devils. Because they've got the forearms.
Mm-hmm.
They got the weird looking faces and the horns. And that's pretty much it. They're brutal, they're warlike, and they can plane shift into the prime.
They always kind of reminded me of a reptile version of Thri-kreen.
I could see that. I see them more like...
Because they have the forearms.
Yeah. I see them almost as kidnapping versions of Klingons. Like red kidnapping reptile Klingons. Because they're very warlike. They're big on, like, their society is all very, like, stratified according to military ranks and stuff like that.
I can see that. They're just a little more cannibalistic. But other than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like cannibalistic reptile Klingons.
Sure.
Kapla. Now we also have the Ethergonts. This is 3.5, but hey, somebody adapted the 5th, guys, or I will. They used to call themselves the Kinzai, and they were a purely alien species that sought to purge themselves of all emotion. Basically, the way that it was described in some of the splat books and such, it was they basically were humanoid, much like the Gith are humanoid, and they became the Githzerai and Githyanki. The Kinzai were the same way. They're a highly advanced society. They moved over to the ethereal plane, tried to purge themselves of all emotion, and they just became this, over millennia, utterly alien, sinister beings. And they wear these crazy-looking suits to determine their rank and such. They're really, really neat.
So they were primes. They left a prime. They evolved
into these crazy beings.
Okay.
Kind of like if we became the gray aliens.
Okay.
That's kind of what I see them as.
So what's their point? What's their purpose here?
Well, they seek to destroy the gods themselves because they're utterly lacking in religion, and they kind of believe that they know that gods exist.
Sure.
But they know that they're just powerful beings.
Technically true, depending on what world you hail from.
Yes.
Because some gods are gods, and some gods are just powerful beings. And some gods are just popularity contests.
Yeah, so they're really cool and flavorful creatures.
All right. So you've got, obviously, the residents of all the demiplanes.
And that could be as varied as demiplanes themselves.
Right. And literally any prime, anybody, anything.
We've got wizards because wizard.
Yeah. There you go.
There you go. Look.
Wizard's gonna wizard.
Wizard's got a wizard. Sorcerer's got a sork, right? Warlocks
got a lock.
Yeah, they got a lock. They don't go ethereal, do they?
Sure.
They might go ethereal. Be a great patron as an ethereal being.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that'd be fun. An Ethergon as a patron.
Yeah, I
could see that as well.
Then you've got people who are stranded.
They're thin, hungry, shriveled up. They've been assailed by ghosts and most likely the phase creatures. The phase cats are just swarming all over them.
You've got random ghouls. Because they're people who
they died of
death.
Yes. Just wandering around.
Yeah.
Angry as hell.
All right. You also you have here cenotaphs. What is that about?
Cenotaphs are interesting. And again, depends on the version, but
Sure.
they're ethereal duplicates, which sometimes end up in the deep ethereal. Basically, because of deep psychic resonance. Maybe you were in a battle. You might have created an ethereal duplicate of yourself.
Spawned a mini-me?
Yeah.
Neat.
Well, they naturally kind of collect in the deep ethereal. So they go from the border and they just kind of wander until they get into the deep ethereal, and they form towns. So you might have a random town with a bunch of duplicates from adventurers or just anybody in general, and they become entirely different societies.
So hear me out. What if you have a wizard who can, like a research wizard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who continuously puts themselves in stressful situations
to duplicate
in hopes of spawning dupes so that he can travel to the deep ethereal because you've got a dozen research wizards in the deep ethereal doing the work that you would be doing.
It's like the D&D version of the world of Ricks from Rick and Morty.
Oh, yeah.
The Rick
Nice. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, that's great.
The Council of Ricks.
The Council of Ricks. Yeah, it's the Council of Wizards. Imagine like a powerful wizard like Elminster or something like that. Just all of a sudden, there's an ethereal version of Elminster. Elminster 275, Elminster 1758.
Oh, see, I love the idea that it's like some young punk apprentice who's like, wait a second, I'm going to go skydiving.
It's just some dumbass wizard who maybe failed on his graduate course at the Wizard College, but he's just good enough to go ethereal. And so he skydives and right at the last minute casts Featherfall.
Like, anything he can, because he knows that the more of him that exists, the more research is going to get done.
That is ridiculously great. We will explore this more in depth. That's awesome.
That's what my brain's here for.
Oh, I love this. We also have some unique themes that you can think about for your story.
Yeah. The theme of possibility.
Yeah. Proto-matter and all kinds of different universes being spawned inside the ethereal plane. Possibility is essential to this plane.
Absolutely. Manipulating fundamental forces in much the same vein.
Yes. I would say being lost or encompassing like the vastness of the ethereal plane is a nice, really fun theme to explore.
And you can even explore like the creep side of that, right?
And you
Just
should.
Lost in fog for a timeless amount of time.
Yes. Well, and timelessness is another great theme to explore because you can literally run into time storms. And I should also say time elementals.
And time travel.
Now,
you know I hate it, but it's still a brilliant thing to explore.
Now, if you ran into a time elemental,
Mhm.
would that be a stressful enough event to spawn another wizard? See, then you would
Yes.
Then you would go back in time, meet your backwards self and your forward self and your duplicates from that as well, because that would also be traumatic.
So here's a question.
How many wizards can you create without actually casting the clone spell? Because that's what I'm thinking about.
Well, I mean, that is certainly fair. I was going to say, if you deal with a time elemental and you're like, oh crap, how do you deal with this? And you summon a Marut, which is inevitable.
An inevitable? Yeah.
Yes. And then just get out of the way. You see what I'm saying?
That inevitable is going to be pissed at you. Because you've already broken reality multiple times, although not necessarily. You really just created another one.
But the inevitables have no beginning or end. They're cyclical creatures. There's always an inevitable, and it knows the things that it's supposed to know.
I feel at some point we should have a cat with bread, a buttered toast on one end of it. At this point, you've got like a perpetual D&D motion machine here with an inevitable.
Apparently my brain is just here to break the world to die.
That's great. I love that. What are some other themes we have, Matt?
Well, obviously you've got ghosts.
Yeah, ghosts and mystery.
Yeah. Creation.
Mm-hmm.
And that can either be on small scale or on a very vast scale. And the wonderful primordial soup.
It's delicious and chunky.
As hearty.
Yeah, hearty primordial soup. Yes, brought to you by Insert Soup Company.
Exactly. Hit us up.
Finally, we come to some story ideas for your campaign. Again, these are never exhaustive. These are just some to kind of get a little taste in your mouth, something you can come up with, whet the appetite, so to speak.
Indeed. I love this one. This one is an idea that I enjoy. A very rare component harvesting. So because worlds are born in the deep ethereal, you could be sent to harvest the first flower from a new world.
That's fun.
That is a rare component, right? That's for making legendary
You
stuff.
could literally get a sample of a new universe being born as well.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? You've got all your vials because you've been creature harvesting, and you have a vial. What's in that vial? Oh, that's a baby universe.
He's such a good boy.
Piece of a universe. That'd be kind of neat.
He's my favorite little universe.
You could have a holy quest, maybe bring sunlight to a world that's never seen it.
Yeah, I mean, Paylor would be down for that, I
He'd
think.
be down for that, yeah. He likes light.
You could be sent to lay to rest a powerful ghost. The characters must meet it on its own turf.
And the home turf happens to be the ethereal plane.
Yeah.
Killing on that. An artificer seeks vials of ethereal substance for a universal materia experiment. Because remember, that's proto-matter just according to your will. Artificers would kill for stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
They finally can have their spanner that they want. Complete set of tools.
Oh, yeah. What if you've got someone who wants to be a warlock, but they don't want to do fiends? They don't want to talk to a lich. They want to talk to a true primordial being.
And that could be elemental primordials or just primordial.
Yes.
Because the ethereal plane could contain primordial concepts as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that we haven't explored a whole lot, but imagine the concept of fear, the concept of, I don't know, like an animal, like the snake.
Yep. Joy.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Where would you go? Go to ethereal plane for that.
What are you? I'm a joylock.
Joylock. Oh, tiefling joylock. It'd be great. A wizard tasks the party to deliver an item into the deep ethereal for whatever purpose.
Sure. And then to attach to that, and then they get stranded.
Yes, players are stranded in the deep ethereal. How much fun that could be. And what a great way to throw in some of the new expansions that are coming out.
Sure. Now, you came up with this one, and I love it. I think it's brilliant. Players receive a baby demiplane that is only 1 foot big and must grow it.
Yeah, they got a tiny little demiplane.
Yeah.
That could be a reward for whatever their particular quest when it ends. Could be like I guess it's an artifact because it's a demiplane.
It's a bag of holding.
Yeah,
It's a bowling ball of holding at the moment.
It's a baby bag of holding because it's not even that big, right? It's only a foot big. But maybe they have to go to the ethereal plane, feed it. Maybe it extends a tendril into the prime, and that's how they access it, so that eventually they can grow a door and they can go hang out in it. Maybe they have to feed it specific substances from the prime or other planes to make it larger.
Yeah.
Maybe it's intelligent.
There's a lot of ways that I would, as if I were to DM that, there's a lot of answers I would accept. I wouldn't have anything concrete. If you come up with a dope idea, yeah, man, that's part of the answer.
Yes.
Everything can be part of the answer if the excuse is good enough.
Players find an ancient city that doesn't exist on the prime anymore, but it exists on the ethereal plane. And again, what happens if you run into the ruins and there's a house plant in the door? Got to deal with that, right?
Claim or make your own uninhabited world or demiplane.
So very similar to receiving your own baby demiplane. This one where
you just go.
Yeah.
Stake your flag.
This would be great for mid to high level campaigns where they've already built their base out. They've already taken over half the country. What's next? They got to have their own plane.
Yeah.
That's how they become gods, right?
You go to one of those newly birthing worlds. Claim it.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're the most powerful being now.
Mm-hmm.
Keep everybody else out. A rash of burglaries in a neighborhood point to the thief that can move through walls. Does that thief go ethereal? Is it an ethereal filter? Or is it something more sinister?
Could be. Could be a rogue that rides an ethereal filter.
Oh, that'd be kind of cool. Could also be a string of disappearances.
Sure.
Maybe the Zill are grabbing people and yanking them for their armies.
Hunting for long-lost ruins by looking for their echoes in the ethereal plane.
So kind of finding a Indiana Jones type deal?
Yeah.
That'd be kind of fun.
If you know that something was in this area, but you don't know where it was, might be a good idea to pop over and look around over there because a civilization is bound to leave some kind of mark.
Absolutely. And finally, bleed over from the plane is causing echoes to appear on the prime material plane. And what do you do when there's 500 half-good wizards just suddenly crop up around your wizard tower?
We finally did it. We finished the research.
Winston the wizard suddenly just sprouts everywhere, and they all start speaking in one voice. Damn you, Winston! The Archmage is all pissed off because there's like a sea of them.
Going back to the Rick and Morty thing.
Council of Ricks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. They all show up on the Prime.
Except instead of unlimited Ricks, there's just unlimited Mortys, the apprentice.
It's just one asshole. It's just the sea of this one. And now I got to feed him and put him up for the night.
Hey, Rick.
How dare you? So there you have it. A couple of ideas, some denizens, some of the topology and hazards of the ethereal plane for you to use in your next campaign.
Absolutely.
Any questions or comments, feel free to send it our normal way, info@goblinscorner.com, or you can reach me, Eric@goblinscorner.com, or
me, Matt at goblinscorner.com.
As always, we're on all the things. Matt, what are all those things we're on?
We're on Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok.
As Goblins Corner.
And Instagram.
As The Goblins Corner. Do you like our show? Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player, YouTube, and Twitch.
If you could do us a favor and click the 5 stars and give us a review on iTunes and Podchaser, and for YouTube, if you could like, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff. Toss us a comment every now and again. We'd appreciate it.
We would like that as well.
Yeah. It feeds the hungry algorithm.
Which is currently birthing a new demi-plane that you can stick in your pocket.
Woohoo!
That's all the time we have for tonight. Once again, my name's Eric.
And I'm Matt.
We'll see you next time.
Good night, folks.
The Goblins Corner is written and produced by Eric Holden and Matt Staples.
Show song by the Mighty D20.
What a wonderful guy.
This is a Subterranean production.
The end.